There's heaps of YouTube videos that show how to calibrate ESCs using the Motors tab in Cleanflight. Well, today I'd like to show you another way of doing it. I've got a battery, 3S battery here in this case, connected to the quad to give power to the PDB and out to the ESCs. I'm programming each ESC. These are Little Bee 20 amps, programming them each one by one. So I've got at the moment ESC number 2 for the right front motor or right front ESC connected to this Arduino Nano, which is connected to the PC running BlHeli Suite. So first thing I need to do is connect to the ESC and read the current setup. Acknowledge that. So these are the factory settings that this particular ESC is shipped with. I've seen them shipped with different versions of software, of course, and even different settings. The ppm min throttle, these are the typical default settings. I like reducing this to 1080 and the max throttle increasing that to 1920. And I'll explain how that relates to Cleanflight a bit later, but the point being that it's 20 points lower than 1100 here, and it's 20 points higher than 1900 here. So they're all the settings for that ESC. Finally, the most important thing is to write the setup to make sure it's saved and hit OK. Disconnect, and I can now take that off, and that ESC number 2 is now programmed how I want it. I'll continue on programming the rest. They'll all be exactly the same, especially this min throttle and max throttle settings here need to be 1080 and 1920. I'll reverse the motor direction where I need to, but yeah, as I said, the rest of the settings are the same. I'll do that for the rest of the ESCs on here, then I'll show you in Cleanflight how I configure that to match. I have the flight controller connected to the PC via the USB cable. I've got Cleanflight running here. Now this is step 2 of the process, setting the min and max throttle values in Cleanflight, but let me just remind you the values that we used in BlHeli Suite were 1080 on the min throttle and 1920 on the max throttle. So they're the numbers we want to enter over here. 1080, 1920. You can choose whatever numbers you like, but as long as they match, this is effectively the ESC calibration process all done. So I'll save and reboot. And so the third and final step in this calibration process is to calibrate the transmitter throttle position so that we have minimal throttle stick movement before we get the motors to spin. We've got no dead zone in the bottom of the stick here. So this is the first time I've set up a Tyrannus, but by default the throttle value here on the receiver tab is 987, and that's way too low. What's going to happen here is when I arm the quad, it's going to be a lot of throttle movement and go up to there before the motors start spinning. So I've got this whole wasted dead band or dead zone down here. So I'm going to get rid of that using the sub trim menu. So on the Tyrannus, I adjusting in the sub trim menu. This throttle, you can see that's going up as I adjust it. I'm just going to bring it up to about just under 1080 to start with. There we go, 1078. Now arm the quad and check. Yep, there we go. Most of it's gone, but I want to set it right against the So now I just keep winding this up until the motors start spinning, which they're not going to. This thing seems to disarm really quickly. So, okay, I'm just going to throttle it, adjusting that sub trim up. There we go. Now the motors are turning with me adjusting the sub trim. So I'm just going to wind the sub trim down until those motors stop spinning, and then go an extra few clicks. So I'm just still adjusting the sub trim on the Tyrannus, and there they go. Okay, so 2 or 3 extra clicks, and the value has stopped at 1098. So just under 1100. I might just go down a little bit lower, 1096, and let's rearm. See if that dead zone's gone. Yeah, look at that. Barely have to move the stick before the motor starts spinning. So that's set the min value. Now I want to set the max value. So to do that, I disarm the quad and push the throttle stick all the way up. And it's gone up to 2000 there, which is too high. So I'm going to adjust in the menu here. If I can work this out. The max value. Actually, it even tells me there on the Tyrannus what it is, and I'm going to pull that down to closer to 1940. There we go, and that matches about what we're seeing there. So, okay. So now my min-max throttle positions are calibrated, as well as the ESC's calibrated. So I'm getting the maximum benefit of the full stick movement, and I don't have any dead zone at the bottom. That's the calibration process as it's done using a Tyrannus. On the Spectrum over here, I'll just show you in the menu how I use that. It's a little bit different. This is a DX7S. I use the servo setup, and I use the same process but come in here to sub trim for the throttle, and I get this highlighted and I wind this up and down until I get the motors to spin like I did on the Tyrannus using their sub trim menu or outputs menu. That's all I have to show you.